The little things in life can make a big difference. It's why MobilityWorks has been helping people connect with who and what matters most since 1997. Our clients have unique needs, so we treat each of them as individuals. First of all, we listen. Then, we work together to find the best solution. Last, we custom fit clients with precisely the right wheelchair-accessible solution. Rest assured that our relationship doesn't end there. We stay connected so you remain completely satisfied. With locations across the country featuring the largest selection of accessible vehicles and adaptive solutions, including minivans and full-size vans, SUVs and trucks, wheelchair and scooter lifts, turning and transfer seats, hand controls, wheelchair securement, and docking systems. Call us today to learn more about our selection of accessible vehicles and adaptive solutions.
Hello, and welcome back to our AT week. So for our presentation this afternoon, we have Dr. Bunnell. He received his Ph.D. in experimental psychology from Pennsylvania State University in 1983, concentrating in human speech perception and acoustic properties of speech. He is the director of the Nemours Center of Pediatric, Auditory, and Speech Sciences, and head of the Speech Research Laboratory within the CPASS. The ModelTalker Project grew out of speech synthesis research in Dr. Bunnell's lab, and ModelTalker voice banking and personal synthetic voice construction is now provided as a laboratory service of the Speech Research Laboratory. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and post them in the comments of the Facebook video, or if you're attending through Zoom, you can use the Q&A feature. All right.
Thank you, Ray. Let me set about sharing my screen. So I was going to present some information today about ModelTalker, both the voice banking service and the general project that has been running in my lab for quite a while. We'll start out with a little bit of history for everyone. We're now working on our fourth decade of this project. We started in the 1990s, charged really with trying to develop natural sounding child voices for the pediatric hospital that I work for. At that time, we did all of our recording just with voice talent who would come into the lab, children, voice actors, and so forth to do the recording. And we constructed synthetic voices manually, one bit at a time, with students in the lab actually editing waveform files and pasting things together to form what we call diphones. And the ModelTalker system at the time wasn't actually called ModelTalker, but it was what was called a diphone synthesizer, which meant that there were about 2,400 distinct diphone units that was used to synthesize any possible American English utterance. It sounded pretty choppy and blocky, but it was intelligible for the most part. And at the time, it was sort of cutting edge technology in the early to mid 90s when we started doing this. By the 2000s, we had expanded the technology a lot, moved away from diphone synthesis and into what's ultimately called unit selection synthesis, where instead of having just a very small inventory of little segments that we could paste together in novel ways, we have full recordings of fluent speech from a talker, many, many more. And we use computer search algorithms to search through the recordings and find the bits and pieces that are needed to paste together to produce a more fluent sounding and more natural sounding utterance. And that was the technology of the 2000s that was called unit selection, is still called unit selection. Until very recently, the voices that you're probably used to hearing in commercial devices like Siri and Alexa were actually unit selection voices. The major difference between Siri and Alexa and a ModelTalker voice is that, of course, Siri has, I think, 20 or 30 hours of running speech recorded, of course, by voice talent under studio conditions and managed by a significant amount of laboratory processing to get that voice sounding as smooth as it is. Whereas a model talker voice typically has around an hour of actual speech in it instead of around 20. And obviously it's not recorded in a studio usually. And typically the ALS client who's doing the recording isn't someone with a voice talent background. So it can be very difficult for them to reproduce the level of professional quality that one would hear from Siri or Alexa. But one of the things that we realized in the 2000s was that with the expanded technology still geared originally towards children, we were able to offer personalized voices to anyone who was able to record the speech samples, and then started trying to provide the model talker service to clients who perhaps were diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disorder, ALS or MND as it's called in the UK. Were among our earliest clients, and today they are among the most frequent clients as well. Then moving on to the 2000s, we moved from just doing unit selection voices to doing what's now called parametric synthesis, where instead of trying to actually cut up recordings of speech and paste them together in novel ways, we build numerical models of the speech and then generate the speech waveform de novo from those models rather than from bits and pieces of previously recorded speech. The advantage of parametric synthesis is that it can often sound a lot smoother and more natural than the unit selection voices. The disadvantage is that a good unit selection voice typically sounds much more natural because you're really listening to natural recordings that are just reproduced in a novel arrangement of segments rather than something that's generated from scratch. But the technology is changing, and some of the latest voices with deep neural network technology are actually very hard to distinguish from natural speech. And in fact, that's the kind of voices that we're working on right now. At the moment, we have in the 2020 section here, we're working with hybrid DNN voices. These are voices that use a little bit of DNN technology and a little bit of unit selection technology, but they're a clear improvement over the old original unit selection voices. And now about 60% of the people that we make voices for end up preferring a hybrid DNN voice to the unit selection voices, although we continue to offer both of them. Our research focus for this decade and beyond is to continue to improve the quality and naturalness of speech while simultaneously reducing the amount of speech that one needs to record in order to produce that really not natural sounding voice. And to add more expressiveness, because to date, synthetic voices are still extremely difficult to produce expressiveness with. It's very, very hard. If you think in natural conversation of the way we can say yes and mean 20 different things, or no and mean maybe 30 different things, with a synthetic voice, every time you say the word yes, it's going to come out sounding pretty much the same as every other time you try to say yes. So expressiveness is that ability to modulate the tone of the voice to make it really carry much more meaning than it would otherwise than just the words alone mean. That said, let me give you a little bit of a description of where we stand right now as a project in terms of the types and number of voices we make. On average, our lab is producing between 500 and 600 voices per year for primarily ALS, MND patients. We do produce voices for people all over the world. An almost equal share of our clients are from the UK, with a fair number of people from New Zealand and Australia also contributing voices, and of course Canada, as well as the US. We even have made several voices for people in Singapore using what's called Singlish for the Singaporean English that's spoken there. Our technology is now, as I mentioned just a moment ago, largely hybrid DNN, but we are still making also the standard voices. And I'll give you an example of what those two technologies sound like so you can hear them up close and personal, as it were.
Arthur the rat. Once there was a young rat named Arthur, who could never make up his mind. Whenever his friends asked him if he would like to go out with them, he would only answer, "I don't know." He wouldn't say yes or no either. He would always shirk at making a choice. Even his Aunt Helen said to him, "Now look here. No one is ever going to care for you if you carry on like this. You have no more mind than a blade of grass."
So that was a unit selection voice. And although it sounds very natural in terms of the voice quality, you may have noticed that there were a few jumps and even a single place there where a word was actually missing from the synthesis because of the way that the speech came out of the analysis process. Here, by contrast, is the same utterance and the same speaker, but now using our hybrid DNN technology.
Arthur the rat. Once there was a young rat named Arthur, who could never make up his mind. Whenever his friends asked him if he would like to go out with them, he would only answer, "I don't know." He wouldn't say yes or no either. He would always shirk at making a choice. Even his Aunt Helen said to him, "Now look here. No one is ever going to care for you if you carry on like this. You have no more mind than a blade of grass."
So as you might have heard with that example, the speech has a slightly less natural voice quality, but in general, the flow was better. One of the words that was missing was back again in the utterance that's produced by modeling the speech rather than by cutting it up and just pasting it together again. So those are the two technologies that we've worked with. I'll say more about that in just a moment. Other things that we're working on now is more or less continuously, we try to make improvements to the website as we discover problems or think of things that would make it easier to use, the ModelTalker website, that is. We've added in recent times the ability to produce custom sentences, and we work on improving the way that works. We've tried to simplify and improve the recorder interface so that it's less difficult to work with. We've added the ability for people to audition their voice. So we'll give them multiple different examples of voices that we could build from their recordings and ask them to audition the different examples and pick the one that they like best. And we've added a section for donated voices that allows people who are unable to complete the voice banking themselves, perhaps they had bulbar onset ALS and their voice had already declined too much before they could even think about voice banking, that they can find a donated voice that has the dialect and voice quality that they like, and then download that from us instead. One of the things that we're working on setting up is to have sort of office hours that we will offer for people, almost a session like this, where we would use Zoom or some other similar technology and provide ability to keep people informed on our plans and new features to the website, and answer questions and hear about issues that people have in using the technology online. So let's dive a little bit more into the different types of recordings, the different amount of recording and the types of voices that we can produce. We used to have a set inventory of just 1,600 utterances that we asked everybody to always record. We changed that with the latest version of the website to use actually 3,155 or almost 3,200 sentences and as many custom phrases as they wish to add, so that it's possible to produce a fairly large inventory of speech now. When we tell people to go at it and start the standard inventory, however, we let them know that if they can get to at least 400 sentences, which is a really relatively small amount, probably you can record 400 sentences in a couple of hours and be done with it and have a voice. So it's possible to make a voice with a relatively small investment of time. But the important thing for everybody to understand is that the more you record, the more likely the voice is going to better represent your own natural voice quality. So there's always some incentive to record a little bit more than that 400 sentences. But I wanted to give you an example of the two technologies and the trade-offs related to the number of sentences that you record. So I picked 3 cutoff numbers that people often use. The minimum number of sentences being 400 and the maximum number of sentences, and then what was our old standard of 1600 sentences. And we can listen to, this is a recordings and a voice built from one of our voice talent recorders. So even at 400 sentences, his recordings are actually pretty good. And that does make it a little bit difficult to do the demonstration that I wanted here, but hopefully you can hear some of the differences nonetheless. So here's a 400 sentence inventory using unit selection.
The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks.
And that had a couple of little jitters and misses in it. It might have been quite difficult for you to hear if you're not used to listening to this type of speech. By comparison, here's the hybrid DNN voice built from the same set of sentences exactly.
The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks.
And that last word, planks, still sounds a little bit strange. It actually has something to do with the way the voice talent recorded that word at one point, and there's not much we can do about that because it's modeling his recording even with the hybrid DNN voice. But you may have noticed that the hybrid DNN voice sounds smoother than the unit selection voice did, a little bit more naturally paced, if you will. Then let's just jump down and listen to the most extreme number of sentences that could be recorded for this talker.
The birch canoe slid on the smooth planks.
We still have an odd sounding plank, but everything else there was flowing much more naturally. And when we listen to the hybrid DNN voice at 3155 sentences,
the birch canoe slid on the smooth planks.
It actually sounds a little bit more almost robotic because you can hear the difference in voice quality. So one of the things that we've noticed is that talkers who are speaking fluently and able to record all 3,155 sentences do more frequently choose the unit selection voice because it's a better representation of their natural voice quality, whereas talkers who are unable to record that number of sentences for whatever reason tend to be more likely to choose a hybrid DNN voice, which sort of makes up for what's missing in the unit selection recordings. So what I want to do now, having sort of gone over where we are with the state of the art at ModelTalker, is talk a little bit about what the voice banking process itself is really like. And to do that, I'll go over some of the prerequisites for voice banking, how to get started and choose which method of voice banking you want to use. We have 2 possible ways of doing that, and then go into a little bit more detail for our online voice recorder and how to get that set up and run through the process of generating a voice. And then I'll end with a little bit of information about pricing and possible financial support for people as well. So there's sort of 3 things to think about in terms of the prerequisites for successful voice banking. One of them is really a human factors kind of thing. How normal is your speech to begin with? If it's only mildly dysarthric, it's probably still fine. But if you are moderately or more severely dysarthric, voice banking may not be the technology that's going to work well for you. Another really crucial factor is the ability to speak very consistently as you go along. Not vary your rate from one sentence to another and not vary your tone of voice. Speak softly on some sentences and very pressed voice on other sentences. That just makes for a very difficult set of recordings to model when we're done and trying to model them. And of course, you want to actually avoid overacting and over enunciation of words, and just try to speak in a very relaxed, natural fashion each sentence as it comes along. For hardware, most current desktop and laptop computers should be fine. If you have one of the less expensive netbooks or a tablet, that's probably not going to be good technology to do voice banking with. And as for microphones, we strongly encourage people to use a head-mounted microphone with a USB connection. That way our software can actually identify the microphone and make sure the right microphone is being used to record. Good microphones from companies like Sennheiser, Jabra, and Plantronics are available in the 40 to 60, maybe a little more cost US dollars. We've had mixed success with Logitech products. Some of them have been very nice, and yet others have produced kind of a lot of background noise in the audio signal. So they've been a little bit less ideal. And of course, professional grade headset with a good USB audio interface is also fine, but a fairly expensive investment for most voice bankers. The third thing that's crucial really is the recording environment. Obviously, if you have a studio and an IAC booth in your house, that would be a good thing to use. Absent that, as most people are, you want a small room with a lot of padding, very few hard surfaces exposed. If you have a large walk-in closet, that would be sort of an ideal recording environment for the home. And some people have been able to create sort of a recording space by setting up screens around a desk set in the corner so that it doesn't get a lot of room echo and reverberation. You also need to keep in mind that you might have appliances in the room that are turning on and off. People are often unaware of that, but they can cause serious problems for the voice recording. Once you've got everything set up in terms of the prerequisites, then what you need to do is visit our website. Be sure to listen to some example voices on our demo page to calibrate your expectations to what can be done with this technology and you as a normal speaker, not voice talent that Apple and Amazon use for their voices. You will need to register with the website. There are a few pieces of information that we do require now. Obviously, a name and email so that we can get in touch with you. You have to create a username and password. And we like to record your gender, age, and dialect so that we can better match that to other features of the speech. There's a lot of other questions that we ask that you can skip if you don't want to provide us things like your phone and address. We do also ask you to let us know whether we can keep copies of your speech to use in research and whether or not it's okay to publicly display your speech. If you want to request financial support, there's also a link that lets you do that at the same time that you register, but this is not something that happens automatically. You have to decide to do that. And then you need to select whether you're going to use our online web recorder, which is the one that we recommend, or we have an old Windows program that if you have a Windows PC, you can download and use to record on your PC. We no longer encourage using that, and it's no longer possible to do some of the things with the old Windows program that you can with the website. Some people need to because they don't have a stable internet connection. And so that's about the only reason that we keep that program around anymore. A little bit more about the difference between those two systems. The voice recorder, the online system, VREC we call it, just requires you to have the Chrome web browser installed on pretty much any computer. It's a much faster interface. It has a speaking rate meter instead of a pitch meter because we found that speaking rate is much more important than your average voice pitch. We are actively updating the online recorder, and when you record, every sentence is automatically saved on our server as you record it, so the chances of losing the speech is much smaller. With MTVR, if you don't have a good internet connection, you can download and use it on your computer. You don't need to be online when you're doing the recording. You do still need to be able to log into the website to upload your recordings periodically, but you don't need to do that one at a time. Of course, the disadvantage then is that your recordings may be stored on your computer, and if you have a disk crash, you could lose it. There's a quick view of what the MTVR recorder interface looks like if you're using the Windows recorder. That's sort of the last that we'll see of that, because the web recorder is the one that I wanted to concentrate on with the remaining few minutes of this talk, and I'll try to speed things up to not run out of time. When using the web recorder, there's an online setup and training process that you can go through. The first thing it does is it describes what you need again and how to set up Chrome, and gives you a link for downloading Chrome. It guides you through the setup and testing of your setup to make sure that your microphone is actually recording. And then it sets you up to actually record some test sentences on the website. So that we can then listen to your recordings as well and provide some comment. And that's sort of called a screening process. So after you've registered and gone through that training, you record 10 sentences with the online recorder. Then those sentences are tested by us to check the audio quality, the speech quality, your speaking style, give you feedback on all of those things. If there's something we hear that needs to be changed, we'll send you back to record 10 more sentences and so forth. This is very commonly an iterative process. It takes people a couple tries to get it right, and that's to be expected. So people shouldn't feel put upon or concerned if the first time through we ask them to redo the sentences with some feedback on what to change. But once that's all done, then you can proceed to recording the full inventory of sentences that I described earlier. Just a little bit of information about the online recorder itself and what that interface looks like. Along the top of the web page, when you're recording, there's a user menu that shows your username and lets you can click on this to log out. A couple of different locations for help information that would be useful while you're trying to record or later. As you record, we automatically create synthetic voices for you to listen to while you're progressing. And the voices menu shows you in this little emblem here how many currently voices there are that you could use to listen to. If you're doing a custom inventory, there is also this link present here that allows you to create custom sentences, and I'll show you the interface for doing that in a moment. And then the main screen has a progress bar that shows you how far you are with the recording. The meters that indicate for each sentence after you've recorded it, how good your recording is and whether everything is perfect or not. Of these 3 meters, the amplitude is the most important one. You want to be sure that your amplitude is green as much as possible. Speaking rate depends very much on whether your speaking rate, your most comfortable speaking rate, agrees with the speaking rate of our prompts, which is what this is calibrated to. So if you consistently speak a little more slowly than the prompts, that's perfectly all right, and the needle would be off to the left some. It's important to be consistent in your rate, not necessarily to always fall in the green. And finally, the pronunciation meter is there as an indication that maybe there's something you could check in a sentence, but it's not a very definitive measure of the accuracy of your pronunciation. There's so many different ways that people can pronounce a sentence that it's very easy for the meter to be wrong. But if it's in the yellow or green, just accept that your recording must be fine. And if it's in the red, you might want to listen to the recording to make sure that there's nothing that you said incorrectly. And if nothing is wrong, assume the meter is wrong and proceed. To record an actual sentence, you would simply listen to the prompt. It plays automatically, then click the record button. And after the record button has been clicked, speak. The system will automatically stop recording once you've stopped speaking, and then present you with the next prompt and so forth as you iterate around the system for as many prompts as there are or you want to record. When you're completely done recording and you don't ever want to do any more, you want us to build a voice for you from your recordings, you just click the Build My Voice button, and that gives you a chance to change your mind. But eventually what happens is it sends an email to my staff, and we begin to create the voices that you will soon be auditioning. Typically takes 3 to 5 business days for that to happen. Just a little bit about how to control the recorder in terms of this individual sentences. If you see a red in that meter at some point, you can click the speaker on the right-hand side of the screen, and that will play the sentence that you just recorded so that you can hear your own recording. If it sounds good to you, then you proceed. If you need to re-record a sentence, for instance, this sentence down here has a red mark in the pronunciation column. You would click the sentence itself, and that will actually re-prompt you for that sentence. You then try to record it again and listen to it. Once you've redone the sentence and you like the result, you click the double arrows up here to then go back and record the next sentence. Every time you record a new sentence, it's popped into the top of this list and the other sentences are pushed down the list. To enter custom sentences, we have a form that allows you to enter individual words of names of people, places, and things. We discourage using many of those, and in fact, the most you can put in of each of these categories is about 50. You should only put in names of people who are very close to you or names that are difficult to pronounce. My last name, I pronounce Bunnell, but many people say Bunnell. I would probably want to add my last name here so that the system knows how I pronounce my name and doesn't get it wrong. So that would be the kind of name or place name that you would put there. If it's got multiple pronunciations, you want to make sure that you've got the right one. You can add as many phrases, messages, things like that as you want, up to about 1,500 of those. So you can expand the system very extensively in terms of phrases that you record. Here's an example then of the individual words and how those are generally thrown into sentence frames that you would use to produce the sentences that you would record online. After you have pushed that Build My Voice button, we then would construct your voice using processes in the lab that do things like noise reduction and amplitude normalization, correcting the polarity of your waveforms and doing pitch tracking and other analyses of the speech. And from those analyses, we then build 3 of our unit selection voices and 3 of our hybrid DNN voices for you to listen to, and do that in a process that we call auditioning. So in the audition process, after we've built the candidate voices, we send you a link and you follow that link to first set the parameters that you want to set for listening to your voices online. Then you do a 30-sentence audition of those 30 pairs of sentences are played, and for each pair of sentences you choose the one that you like better. Every one of those voices that we created, all 6 of them are paired one with another voice, so that at the end we're able to find the 2 voices that you liked best from the various paired comparisons, and then you're allowed to set the parameters for those voices and choose which one of the 3 would be best for you. And from those 3, then you decide if you want to keep the voice, if your voice costs have already been covered by a support organization, or otherwise you have to purchase it yourself. We then build an installer, and you're able to download the installer and load it into your own computer. As of This summer, we're charging $100 for a voice. I'm not sure how long we will be able to do that before it might have to change. We do allow clinicians to record a voice for free if they're using it as part of their practice to demonstrate to clients what the synthetic voice would sound like. And people who are helping others to record can use the system to do a voice and learn how to work it so that they're able to teach others how to do it. We are also allowing people to donate speech that we would then provide for people who are unable to do their own voice banking. And we're in the process of setting up a small cost for donated voices of about $10 per voice. We're looking at tentatively charging additional amounts for some other special services that we would offer. Those are not coming online anytime soon, but I just wanted to mention them there. Finally, financial assistance is available in the US. The Team Gleason is the primary support organization at this point. Some of the ALS association groups have also in the past and some still presently provide assistance. In the UK, the MND Association, TalkLink in New Zealand, MND and Me is an example of a company in Australia that provides assistance. And private clinics sometimes also pay for voices, as does the Veterans Administration in the US. And I think that's really the end of the important information here. So I'll end by simply acknowledging the people who have helped us in the past and in the present. Dr. Volino and Lily are both PhDs in my lab. Matthew Bazell is our current primary person who deals with voice banking clients. Nellie Butler assists us in some of the background work. And we have developers who have done a lot of the programming for the system, including Dan Edrich, Mike Peck, and Bill Moyers. We're also supported by grants from the National Science Foundation, the NIH, and the NIDRR, which is the Department of Education unit, and of course by Nemours Biomedical Research, which has always been a strong supporter of this project. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Dr. Bunnell. So if there were no questions yet on the Facebook, but if anybody has any questions, we'll give you a couple of minutes to post those, or if you have them on Zoom. So I'll ask one quick question while we're waiting. So when you add custom phrases, do those work like message bank phrases, or you're just using those to help create the voice?
So that's a good question. We do use them in the voice. And so for a unit selection voice, because you recorded that sentence, when it goes into the system, it's literally in your voice data bank then. And if you ask the system to speak that sentence, it will come out sounding almost like a simple audio recording of you saying that sentence. Your recording is there. We also have people who occasionally would like to just take the sentences that they recorded as messages and download just the individual messages then and load them into an AAC device as well.
Okay, thanks. No, that's a good way to double dip, as the other presenter talked about this morning.
That would be John Costello.
Yeah. I don't see any questions right now, but what we can do is we'll definitely forward them on to you, or, and let you know any of those. But thank you so much for presenting. And we'll be back again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Tomorrow we're going to talk about AAC and iGACE. And then again at 1 o'clock, we'll have representatives from 5 different companies kind of show us their devices. But thank you very much again, Dr. Bunnell.
Quite welcome. Thank you.
See you guys tomorrow.
Bye.